And if those of you who weren't here this morning, I'm Robert Massey. I'm from the Royal Astronomical Society. We're one of the other sponsors of the day. And it's my pleasure to chair this session again and to bring up two people again with very different careers to the ones we heard this morning. First up, we have Phil Rosenberg, who is a postdoc. So it's fair to say we are covering academic career tracks as well. And he's in the Institute of Climate and Atmospheric Science at the University of Leeds. And Phil had a background at the PSRI, the Planetary and Space Research Institute in the Open University, analysing work on Titan, and became a civil servant and is back in academia, I guess, now. So he's going to tell us all about that. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah, we're good.
Seems to be.
Yeah. Okay. So I put postdoc in question mark up here. So it's not for everybody. I've left the academic world in some ways and gone off to work for the Met Office, and I've now come back into an academic environment. So I thought maybe it might be interesting to start with to see who here is interested, desperate, absolutely wants to be in academia, or thinks they might want to be in academia, or just feels like they might want to be in academia for the long term. We got people here? So a good maybe half-ish. So let me get my clicker. So interestingly, this is what one of my undergrad astronomy lecturers thought. So I'll let you read that and digest it a little bit maybe, while I say that there are many, many more PhDs awarded than universities do require as postdocs and academic lecturers. So maybe half the people in this room said that they'd quite like to go on to do academia maybe. Probably in reality something like, well, if you believe my astronomy lecturer, about 1% is probably the fraction of you that will go in. So if there's maybe 50, 70 of you in this room, if you look around, that will be one of you will end up as a professor. So when we're talking about networking skills or flexible skills that are useful outside of academia, you will probably all need them. And not only will you need them outside academia should you leave, you'll need them in academia, because fundamentally the same transferable skills that you would use outside of academia, you also use inside of academia. So just to give you an example, so in that lecture there were about 15 to 20 of us doing astronomy. 2 of us went on to do a PhD. Both of us then have ended up doing at least one postdoc. The other person is now a teacher. So, and none of us yet, I guess I've still got a chance, are permanent academics. So, that's the kind of numbers you're dealing with. So life outside academia might be a scary thought, but it is a reality for many, many people that go through PhDs. So I started out my PhD about Titan, one of Saturn's moons, obviously. It was really an exciting time, actually, because my department had some instrumentation on the Huygens probe that landed at the beginning of my second year, so we were looking at data from that probe. Phenomenally exciting. I thoroughly loved it and wouldn't have changed any of it. And I got to the end of it thinking, I'm now an expert on Titan. And I thought that was kind of great. But then I thought, well, what next? Because Titan was kind of done. There were no jobs looking at Titan anymore. We'd got all the data from Huygens. There'd been a glut of postdocs employed to look at that data. And now there were a glut of postdocs who got lots of experience working on Titan that also wanted their next postdoc on that position. And in some ways it comes down to this idea that universities employ many more people, or employ many more PhD students than they do postdocs. And they kind of ask why in some ways. And one of the reasons is because fundamentally you're all cheap labour. You can do a lot of good work in your group, you can write a paper or two maybe, contribute to the rest of the work in the group, and the university gets a lot out of you for that. And in return for that, in theory, this is a good thing, because in return for that, you get a PhD. You gain a load of skills, you gain a load of expert knowledge about the subject that you're involved in. It's a trade. It's like an apprenticeship, fundamentally. You do work for your employer, your university, and they're training you at the same time. It's on-the-job training almost. But fundamentally, at the end of it, there's a lot more of you than there are roles to go into. And I kind of felt like that when I got to the end of my PhD. I kind of was like, well, I'm an expert on Titan. What do I do now? So the thing you need to think about is you will get to the end of your PhD and you will be an expert in whatever field it is that you're doing. But if that's all you get out of your PhD, you've probably not got a good deal. You need to make sure you've got lots of other stuff as well that prepares you for your next academic post or your next not academic post. Now for me, I had my big stress and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. In the end, actually, I think I'd done okay in that deal. Not only had I got my PhD and was an expert on Titan, my PhD supervisor put me in touch with the BBC. I ended up as a researcher on the Sky at Night for a while. I'd done some consultancy work with my PhD supervisor for ESA as well, on space exploration work. And I kind of felt like, actually, after sitting back, I thought, I've done quite a lot of good stuff here. I can move on and do something different. And I put off a couple of applications. I actually put one into University of Leeds, where I'm now working. Didn't get that one. If you were in the CV writing thing earlier, there was something about attention to detail and make sure you do your research. I actually found the application form in a box when we moved house. On the covering letter, I'd spelt the professor's name wrong. That probably doesn't go down very well. In the end, I ended up moving to the Met Office. So I applied through their graduate scheme, despite having a PhD. And that was really good, actually. So now I think that the Met Office are very keen on PhD students. Pretty much you need to have a PhD to get into the Met Office, I think, now. There was a time 30 years ago when you could go straight from school to the Met Office, learn on the job. But pretty much now, most people that end up at the Met Office have got a PhD. So you're at an advantage there if you want to go down that route, that particular career, that particular organisation. And the Met Office is a really good place to work, actually. I really enjoyed it there. So actually, I also managed to fish out my application to the Met Office. So this is my personal statement on that application form. And I've put in bold here all the transferable skills that I discussed in that application form. So there's things there in terms of numerical work, computer programming, independent working, group working, working in the lab, analysis methods, statistics. Someone asked earlier, I think, about statistics, and I don't really do statistics. If you've ever put an error bar on a plot, you've done statistics. And you're doing better than a lot of postdocs, to be perfectly honest, as well. So this was kind of the transferable stuff that I had on there. This is the same, but highlighting the specific knowledge, my expertness about Titan there. I could have read that off Wikipedia. I mean, literally, it's there to give context to the rest of the transferable skills that I'm talking about. And those transferable skills were the key. I mean, I got the job in the end. And like I say, having a PhD was useful. I got to mention it in the interview in terms of, well, this is a graduate scheme, I'm applying with a PhD, what's that mean for me, and discuss those kind of things. And it was really, really enjoyed it. And when I ended up working was the Facility for Airborne Atmospheric Measurements. And this is a joint NERC Met Office facility. The aircraft there is chock full of instrumentation for measuring atmospheric chemistry, cloud microphysics, aerosol physics. And I was essentially responsible for some of the cloud and aerosol instrumentation on that aircraft. And I really enjoyed it. I was there for about 3 years. But after 3 years, I kind of come to a realization that it was quite a small group. We were away from the Met Office HQ. And unless I wanted to be dealing with the same bit of kit for the next 20 or 30 years till I retire, probably more than that, I kind of decided I needed to get out. And I wanted to get back into more research. This was not really a research role. So I ummed and ahed. I spoke to some people at the Met Office about moving to their HQ and what I could do down there. And that was certainly an option, but that's in Exeter. And at the time, me and my wife had just had our first child. My family was all up in Yorkshire. Her family was over in Kent. And we didn't really want to move to Exeter geographically. So we decided that was not for us. So I started looking at universities instead and what I could do. Now, I had a little bit of experience in meteorology. Could I then move into a more meteorological postdoc? And that's exactly what I did. So I then moved on to University of Leeds. Interestingly, in doing so, what I did was give up a permanent contract at the Met Office to take on a temporary contract at University of Leeds. And I convinced myself I wouldn't be bothered about that. And then when I got there, I was working on 2 projects to start with jointly. One was called Fennec, which was looking at the Sahara. So actually, we were taking the aircraft that I used to work on and I was becoming its customer, essentially. We were taking that aircraft away around the world, and doing field work with it. And that was one of the things I loved about the previous job, so it was really great to be able to keep doing that. So in Fennec, we took the aircraft out to the Sahara, flew over the Sahara, and did measurements of dust and dynamics over the Sahara. We did work in a project called Diamet, which was part of the Storms Risk Mitigation Project, which was looking at high winds and windstorms in the UK. So that was for 3 years, that contract. And then from there, I went on to do 9 months working on a project called Microscope, which was looking at convective clouds in the UK. 3 months on a short contract doing instrument development work. And that was the point at which I thought, I've got less than 6 months left in my funding. Did I really want to give up that job on a permanent contract at the Met Office? And I struggled a bit there, you know. I'm actually now the postdoc rep, and when I agreed to do this talk, I said I would give the rough with the smooth. And the rough is that fundamentally, as a postdoc, you can get to the ends of a contract and there'll be nothing for you. You know, you can get to that point and think, what did I do wrong? And you potentially didn't do anything wrong. You potentially did a very good job, but your supervisor didn't get some funding, so you can't have another postdoc. So and that's the end of it in some ways. And I ended up on what the university calls redeployment, and I think pretty much every university has got a similar system where you get access to job adverts that would go external before they go external, so you can apply for them without external competition. And that's what I did. Some people don't like that system because they feel like they're kind of imposing themselves on supervisors because the supervisor could potentially get someone better if they went external with the advert. In reality, you know, this is basically the minimum that the university is required to do by law to comply with redundancy legislation. You've invested your time and effort in the university, and they've invested quite a lot of effort and money into you, training you. So actually, keeping you on, and maybe giving you a little bit of extra training to move into a slightly different role, is absolutely in their best interest. And some academics don't quite see it that way, but fundamentally, you know, it's they've got a responsibility to you. You've put your time into them. And actually, it is really genuinely in the best interests of the academic institution in question. So, and actually, what you notice is that all these posts, so I moved on from that actually then to DACUA, which is what I'm working on now, which is a project looking at clouds and aerosols over West Africa and how that might impact the monsoon system in Africa. And what you'll notice is that all of these things are different. So I went from a PhD looking at instrumentation data from Titan, instrumentation then at the Met Office. I then did work on the aircraft looking at more back into research, again with observationally based in the Sahara and looking at windstorms in the UK, two totally different subjects. Then looking at convective clouds again, another different subject, and now I'm looking at clouds and dynamics and aerosols in West Africa, and now I'm doing computer simulations. I'm now a modeler running the Met Office's unified model on their supercomputer. So I've swapped around a lot, and that's very, very possible. Something I've really come to appreciate is that academics would much prefer a good postdoc that is not quite within their field rather than a mediocre postdoc that's bang on the nose in terms of the subject. Again, that specialist knowledge, my expertness in Titan, or whatever other subject it is I've done since, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, but it's not always the main thing. We just had a set of job interviews, again, looking for moist convection. And one of the people invited to interview was an aerodynamicist who was looking at jet engines and flow through jet engines. But they could see the links in terms of some of his specialist knowledge, and they could see he was very good. And at the after presentation stage, he was one of the favourite candidates in the room. So bear in mind that you need to take your blinkers off in some ways. I was very blinkered when I finished my PhD. I thought I can only do Titan. Take those off a bit and look around because there's a lot that you can do. Something else I do a little bit just to keep my skills up again, because fundamentally I'm in the same boat as you in some ways. I've now got another 1.5 years on my current project before my money runs out again, so I need to keep myself employable as well. So I do a little bit of freelance computer programming on the side, and these are the kind of skills that you can build up and get experience with. So you might not want to do freelance computer programming, but if you can do, as part of your PhD, a programming course and get some experience using that course, and the two together are really key, or project management course and then some experience, that's really useful. And that might be contributing to an open source library that you get involved with, that you make use of as part of your PhD. Contribute to a Python library or something like this. These things are really, you can put that on your CV and show that you've got the skills and you've used them, and that's really key. So I'll just put a quick summary up there now. I think I've gone a little bit over maybe, but that's, just essentially the most important point there, take your blinkers off. And academics love transferable skills as much as non-academics do. And I'll finish there.
Actually, on the contrary, Phil, you're miles within your time. So,
oh, really?
If anybody wants to ask any questions at this point, we'll have him back over a panel a bit later. Can you wait? I think there's someone got a roving mic going around. Nope. Okay, just
shout loud.
If you could repeat it for the recording, that would be great.
What was the coolest thing you found out about Titan?
So when I started my PhD, the main hypotheses about Titan were that it had a global ocean of methane, because they'd seen methane in the atmosphere and they knew that over geological timescales that gets oxidized and it shouldn't be there. So there needed to be a source coming from somewhere. When we actually got there and we saw it, it was way neater than that, I thought. So we landed not in an ocean, on dry land, but from Cassini and from the photos we took on the way down, we saw that there was a whole hydrological cycle going on. So there are clouds, there is rain, there are rivers, there's the surface of Titan is being shaped by those fluid flows, there's lakes on the surface in various locations. And the fact that there's this whole hydrodynamic cycle going on, but with methane instead of water, I thought was fantastic. I thought it was really cool.
I was just wanted to know more about the Met Office, because I know you said you worked with the plane thing, but so what would there be at like the central Exeter place?
So the Met Office is, in the atmospheric science community, is kind of regarded in some ways as kind of the holy grail of a job, because it's permanent. They do a lot of research. They're one of the few Met services in the world that do a lot of research. So they've probably got a few hundred employees there. It's much bigger than any atmospheric science department in the country. They've got a range of people doing either instrument development for the aircraft, instrument development for satellites, or instrument validation for satellites. They've got a lot of people doing model development for obviously providing the UK's forecast, but they also sell their forecasts around the world. So they're not just interested in the weather that's going on in the UK, they're interested in the weather that's going on globally. And obviously climate change as well. So they've got a whole separate section of the group there, particularly interested in climate change and forecasting climate change. So if you're interested in atmospheric science, then the Met Office is really great. For me, geographically, it wasn't quite perfect, but fundamentally, I would have loved to have stayed there. If I could have lifted the Met Office up and put it in Yorkshire, then it would have been perfect. Some people do say that they're not as well paid as university. In some ways that's true, but they do get a golden-plated pension as well. So there's other benefits, shall we say. So.
Okay, perhaps we could take one more question, then move on to the second speaker. Anybody else? We can do that. Before I introduce the next speaker,